Alleluia. Alleluia.
This Sunday's Old Testament reading from the book of Exodus, we see God and Moses meeting in the tent of meeting. The people became impatient with the whole process and made themselves idols and worshipped the idols. And it is then that these talks between God and Moses start. Amidst the struggle, amidst the unfaithfulness of the Israelites, their broken promises, these two friends can still have an open and honest conversation. One that leads to Moses experiencing the glory of God. God wants to abandon the people and make Moses into a new nation. But Moses knew who he was, and he reminded God about who God was. Sometimes we too go through difficulties, and sometimes we feel as if we will not be able to make it. Sometimes we too forget who we are. And it is in these moments of the despair that we hear the words of Moses addressed to God. Remember that this nation is your people. And that is who we are, the people of God. In the most difficult of times, we too need to be reminded of this, that we are God's people. We need to be reminded that God knows us and that God is with us throughout the challenges we face, despite what we have done, who we have become. When we realize that we need God not only to make sense of our lives and our circumstances, but also to show us the way through the challenges we face, then we truly understand what it means when God says, "My presence will go with you, and I will give you rest." Presently, we live in a time that none of us could ever have imagined. Our very foundations have been shaken, and we are being asked questions that we chose to ignore for the longest time. The challenges we are faced with now threatens the very basis of how we understand and how we live our lives. Looking back over the last year, we see how the world has changed. All around us, we see the effects of the pandemic. Our economy, our social contract, our education and other systems are struggling to cope with what is to be called the new normal. Like the Israelites, we are also embarking on a journey where God will bring us to a promised land that will have as its destination a new reality for each and every one of us. Throughout this pandemic, we have learned, we have seen ourselves through new eyes. The pandemic is making us see our relationships in new ways. Our priorities are now changing, just as we are changing. It is important for us as Christians to reflect on what it means at our very core to be the people of God. People whom God knows personally. People who knows God personally. People who know that they need God. And people to whom God reveals God's self. Much of our religion is about revelation. God has revealed God's self to us, and we are called upon to join each other in this journey of revelation, finding out who we are in relation to God and each other. We're almost at the end of a very difficult year, and it has been tough on all of us. We remain prayerful in our journey, and we are optimistic that our future will certainly be brighter. We are now more equipped, for we have learned that our lives can change in the blink of an eye. Looking ahead, it is easier now to say that we have one of the highest levels of recovery, rates of recovery, and that we are better off than other countries. But the challenge we face now is not to become complacent, but to cherish the precious nature of this blessing called life and the freedom that it brings. From all of this, we learn that we belong to the people of God. We are God's people. Therefore, know that despite all that you are, despite all that is happening, you belong to God's people. God is with you, and you will share in God's peace. We all will. We need to acknowledge our need for God. Something very important I need to highlight from this reading is our basic need for God. Moses knows this when he says that if your presence does not go up with us, do not send us up from here. From this very intimate conversation between God and Moses, we learn that despite all our human genius and ability, we need God. And this is what makes us God's people. Our need for God is not a weakness, but it is a strength. We must have faith in this God who gives us strength. And in the end, we only see part of God. As Moses was prevented from seeing all of God, we too sometimes only see part of what God invites us to see. But God wants us to have faith that leads us from the one experience of God to the next. And as we so much desire to see God face to face, to most of us, the face of God still remains hidden. But we know that it is God who is with us in those moments when we could not survive on our own strength and on our own ability. We must live this conviction as Christians, called to show the world that God is still present in this world. In and through our Christian witness, we are those whom God knows. We are those who knows God and who calls our personal relationship into reality every day. Do not allow the knowledge of your own shortcomings to prevent you from showing up, from being there for one another. For the Christian belongs to God's people. God is with us throughout, even in the times when we are not.